Just 1 week to go until Leeds, Yorkshire and the whole country goes to the polls. With such huge stakes in Brexit, social care, education, housing and just how much all of that will cost, there are big choices to make. Tonight's debate is for the marginal seat of Leeds North East. From Meanwood to Woodley, Chapeltown right the way up to Weckup, it's the smallest Labour majority in Leeds. And the question is your decision made? Yes, welcome to the programme. I'm Peg Alexander. Now, here on Made in Leeds, we're due to have 3 debates from some of the most marginal seats in West Yorkshire, the kind of seats that could make all the difference in this election. But due to the tragic events in Manchester, election campaigning and our debates were cancelled last week. Campaigning, though, is well and truly back up and running, and tonight the spotlight is on Leeds North East. So let's get things underway. Let's meet the candidates. First, we have Anne Forsyth, the Green Party candidate. Anne says the party will ensure an immediate investment in the NHS, take urgent measures to address climate change and invest £7 billion in education. Fabian Hamilton is the Labour Party candidate. Now, Fabian's been the MP for Leeds North East since 1997. Shadow Minister for Peace and Disarmament, he says he's committed to fairness, justice and equality. As well as the Lib Dems National Policies, their candidate, John Hannah, says locally he'll bring communities together, build a greener locality and crack down on reckless driving. He's also committed to improvements to teaching. Finally, Ryan Stevenson for the Conservatives. Ryan is a local councillor and is pledging more jobs and affordable housing, community-focused crime prevention panels and better integrated dementia care and services. There are also 3 other parties standing. They are the Alliance of Green Socialism, Christian People's Alliance and the Yorkshire Party. Yes, we'll get straight onto those big issues shortly. For people like you in Roundhay, Moortown, Meanwood and Pottonewton for Leeds North East, and indeed across the city and the country. First though, in just 90 seconds, let's get our heads round some of those big talking points. With this look at the state of play in Leeds North East ahead of June the 8th, here's Joe Robinson.
Leeds North East is a constituency of extreme contrasts. As a whole, the area is the wealthiest of any constituency in our city, with the highest average house price and the highest median full-time wage. But just under a fifth of the neighbourhoods in Leeds North East sit within the most deprived 20% of all areas of our country. In particular, Chapeltown, home to the city's West Indian community and the oldest Caribbean carnival in Europe. The seat also represents one of the largest Jewish communities of any constituency nationally. One of the core issues facing Leeds North East in recent years has been school class sizes. The average for Key Stage 1 is now just under the statutory limit of 30 pupils per class, with 18 out of 23 local primaries either at or above the 30 pupil limit. A local group of parents have been for years campaigning to fill this black hole with a new free school, but issues around site allocation have meant instead bulging of class sizes at 2 local schools. Politically, the seat is a traditional safe Labour seat, with incumbent candidate Fabian Hamilton having held it since 1997, winning in 2015 with a majority of around 7,000. This, however, still makes it the smallest Labour majority in the city, with some polling suggesting the seat could be a realistic Conservative target if they can consolidate the UKIP vote, who are in this election not fielding a candidate. While this could threaten Hamilton's majority, the seat is also believed to be one of the most pro-European seats in the city, in which case Hamilton's record as a Remain campaigner could be decisive in this so-called Brexit election.
Well, this show's going to be run by you. We're live on TV and we're currently on Facebook Live as well. So do get in touch, ask your questions and we'll fit in as many comments as we can. You'll also see some of them on the screen throughout the show. You can tweet us, of course, at Made in Leeds. You can WhatsApp us now on 07771 774 018. Let's get going with the discussion now. We've been out on the streets of Leeds North East for your questions. So without further ado, here's the first question of the show.
My name's Lauren and I want to know, what are you doing to engage my generation in this general election?
OK, so that's Lauren there. Now, Lauren's under 30. You could obviously tell, just to let you know, she's under 30. She wants to know, what are you doing to engage people under 30? Now, there's obviously a lot of issues you could talk about here with this. I mean, a big one, obviously, for a lot of people, young people, is Brexit, who feel that this is about their future. So I'm going to come to you first, Anne Forsay for the Green Party. Tell us what you say to Lauren.
What I say to Lauren this evening, good evening to everybody first of all this evening. I'd like Lauren and everybody else listening to know that the Green Party has in its Green Guarantee a special promise to young people. We think that this time is a time of being very, it's very difficult for young people for various reasons, and I think that was before the referendum last year. So in terms of our pledge to young people, our promise, we have some very specific promises. We would scrap tuition fees, we would reinstate the education and maintenance allowance, and we would also make sure that there was proper funding for higher education and FE. We can't have these young people starting to their working lives with burdened with debt.
Thanks very much. Thank you. And for the Green Party, Fabian Hamilton for Labour. What are you going to say to Labour?
Well, I think the most important issue is housing, affordable housing. Young people are being priced out of homes. We need local authority-built housing to the highest modern standards, to environmental standards that mean they consume 10% of the energy previously. That would save an enormous amount of money for struggling families and young people. We're going to abolish the tuition fees, of course. We've said that very clearly, and we've said how we're going to fund it. We also need to make sure that there are the jobs and the training opportunities for young people. And finally, I think we must make sure that our environment is fit for our children and grandchildren to inherit. We have to reverse climate change. Labour has the policies to do that. Okay. We are the Green Party.
What about yourself, John, for the Liberal Democrats? If Hannah's here, what do you say to her?
Well, for me, I think one of the most important things is engaging young people and people who are going to be future voters in this election. I'm quite proud to say that one of my youngest people running around the city at the moment delivering leaflets and other things, 14 years old, actively getting engaged and doing things. I've actually focused pretty hard within this campaign about using Facebook as a way to communicate directly with voters and communicate directly, in a lot of cases, with young voters, so that we can have a discussion about what I'm standing for and indeed what my party stands for. OK, and Ryan, what about yourself? And sorry, it's not Hannah, it's Lauren. If Lauren's here, what do you say to her?
Well, Peggy, you mentioned that Lauren clearly looks under 30. I think I have the disadvantage of being under 30 and not looking under 30.
No,
what I would say,
not.
as the youngest person on the panel this evening, I would say, look at the record we've had in government in the last 7 years. Unemployment in this constituency has reduced by 60%, youth unemployment down 50%. We've got to get more jobs, more investment into jobs for young people, and that starts at education and in university itself. We've got a record number of people attending university, and proudly a record number of people from disadvantaged backgrounds attending university now. So a sustainable system for universities, sustainable system for schools, and ultimately a strong economy so we can have more businesses investing in the UK and delivering jobs.
Let's stop the debate though. But Ryan, the two at this end both want to get rid of tuition fees. They would say that you're not talking about that, are you?
Well, I would look at Fabian's voting record. I think you voted to introduce tuition fees, Fabian. It was your government that introduced them in the first place.
Yes,
so there's a little bit of irony going on in the debate.
No, I don't think there is. We did not vote to treble them.
Yeah, you introduced them in the first place, so now you want to scrap them.
Yeah, is that not a bit of a problem for you, Fabian?
No, why is it a problem?
Because it's hypocritical.
I'm sorry. I don't think it's hypocritical, Ryan. Look, the fact is that young people are getting a raw deal. Most young people do not want to leave the European Union, for example. The referendum decided we would, but of course under 18s should have had a say in this. They didn't. They did in Scotland, as we know. The fact is that housing, the issue I mentioned, is really vital. If you want to start a family and you're under 30, you need a good home. places for primary school children. I mean, they're being starved. We saw that in the film. It's shocking that we do not have the places, and the local authorities not allowed to build the schools.
So,
We have to have a free school.
John,
That's
you
your
didn't say
government's
what
doing.
you would actually do in your intro.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I thought I was responding to the question rather than giving out the policies that I wanted to. Now, we are very, very keen to have young people involved in what we're doing, and we're really looking to build from that young generation and looking at their future in terms of what happens post-Brexit.
OK, and we've just got a few seconds left.
Just coming down to Brexit, we
Very
basically
quickly.
would go for a soft Brexit. That's what we would look at if it was to happen at all.
You want a
But
second
also,
referendum, don't you?
They should have the right to study and work and live abroad. Our young people deserve the best.
We're going to have to pause there just for a couple of minutes. I'm afraid to say there's going to be plenty more to come after the break as we turn to schools and policing. And we'll have a look at what you at home are saying. Of course, keep the tweets and the comments coming. We're at Made in Leeds. You can WhatsApp us on 07771 774 018. You can find us on Facebook too. We'll see you in 2. Yes, welcome back to Decision Made. We're here with the key candidates for the Leeds North East constituency. That's Anne Forsyth, the Green candidate, Fabian Hamilton for the Labour Party, John Hannah, the Liberal Democrat candidate, and Ryan Stevenson for the Conservatives. Now remember to keep your comments coming. We want to hear your views and thoughts and more questions. We're on Twitter, we're Made in Leeds, and you can also find us on Facebook too. You can email the team, decisionmade@madeinleeds.tv. You can even WhatsApp us on 07771, that's 07771 774 018. So keep the comments coming. And meanwhile, we're going to actually head back to the streets of the constituency itself now. Now we go to James, and James has our next question. It's a question about schools and education, which of course is one of the biggest issues here in Leeds North East.
Hi, my name's James, and my question is, every teacher I speak to seems really demotivated by the system at the moment. What we're going to do to get them back engaged.
Thank you. There we go. That's James from Meanwood. So just to let you know, repeat again what James said. He says that every teacher that he speaks to at the moment seems demotivated by the system. And he wants to know, what are you going to do to get them back engaged? So Ryan, we'll start with yourself for the Conservative Party at the end.
Well, Peg, in your introduction you mentioned that part of my plan for Leeds North East is more outstanding schools, and that comes from my own background. I lead an education advisory body here in Leeds, so I work with teachers on a daily and a weekly basis, and I know the challenges facing teachers today. So what we're going to do, as Prime Minister set out in this manifesto, no school in this constituency or across the UK will see a real terms cut in their budget. We'll invest another £4 billion in schools, but crucially, we need more teachers. So we have a plan so that anybody who goes to university and becomes a teacher, they will not have to repay their student loans whilst they're teaching. That's the way to re-motivate teachers and get better quality teachers as well back into the system. Teachers do an outstanding job in our schools, but then do need the investment, and that's what the next Conservative government would deliver. OK, what about yourself, John, for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, schools are one of my priorities, and I think there's a really important thing in terms of let's look at the pay bill. Let's look at the pay cap that's happened over the last few years. I've been a public servant. I know how demotivating it is, and we will remove that pay cap, but also we are looking closely at the curriculum to see how we can give teachers back power, how we can make it so that they're in control of what they're teaching again, not governed by a really tight way of having to teach to tests.
OK, thank you very much. And Fabian, for Labour.
Well, I think we need to stop the cuts that are going on in our high schools and primary schools. 3.6 million is going to be lost between now and 2019, and I don't know whether the Conservative manifesto says that money will be restored or not, but that's not what the National Union of Teachers says on its website, and that's going to affect every student and every teacher in the classrooms in North East Leeds. But the other thing is, of course, we need to build more primary schools. We have a real shortage of places, and yet Leeds City Council's not allowed to do that. We need to return control of the education system to our local authorities, where locally elected members can look after those schools and can ensure there are sufficient provision of places. And the other thing is to stop the centralisation of education, which has been happening in the last 7 years. that government has been taking over the running of schools, and it's about time it was returned to
Okay,
local.
and what about the Green Party, Anne?
So the Green Party, in the introduction, you said that we would invest £7 billion in education. I totally agree that it's about funding. As an ex-teacher myself, as a retired teacher, I am very concerned as well, James. The question you ask is a huge concern for all of us. I know that there's a problem with teacher motivation and teacher retention. One of the things that the Green Party would do would be to abolish SATs. That gives incredible amount of stress to teachers, and not to mention the pupils as well, very much so. We will also therefore increase the funding that's needed. We would end the academies programme and bring schools under local authority control.
Okay, so there you go, the thoughts from the Green Party. Fabian, I'm just going to come back to you. I mean, you talked there about kind of reforming education, but your manifesto doesn't say anything like get rid of SATs, or it doesn't really talk about reform of Ofsted or anything, does it?
No, well, we do think there should be school inspections because you need to ensure that standards are maintained to the highest possible level. But we do talk about investment in our schools, and we do talk about local government actually retaining control once again of schools. The problem is...
Does that mean you're going to close down all the academies?
No, I don't think we are going to close down the academies. It was the first academies were introduced under a Labour government.
And what about the new free school that's been planned for Leeds North East?
Well, we need to ensure that it is local government that can invest in new schools. You cannot simply rely on a free school starting up, even if the parents who are denied those places have to start up those free schools. It is about resources not being controlled from Whitehall, but being controlled locally by locally elected representatives. And we would bring academies under elected control as well.
Before we come to some questions on Facebook, I mean, Ryan, I want to come back to you. You mentioned there about, you know, going to put money into schools, but even the Institute of Fiscal Studies, also the Education Policy Institute, they all agree that, yes, there may be the largest amount of money going into education, but in real terms, when you put in inflation, when you put in rising pupil number, actually we're talking about a cut of 8% within the next 3 years. That's a big cut to education, isn't it?
Well, no, Peg, the manifesto sets out a real terms investment, £4 billion investment between now and 2020. But I would say the candidates on the panel here might want to talk all about the money, but let's talk about outcomes as well. When the Labour government left office, there were only 70% of children in outstanding schools. Today, there are 90% of children in outstanding schools. It's about how you reform the system and make it work for the pupils in the school.
OK, I just want to go to a message we've got on Facebook, because Nicola's been on Facebook. Nicola, this is directed to yourself, Fabian. She actually wants to know what you are going to do about the Roundhay free school proposal. So just for people who don't know, there is a shortage of primary school places in Leeds North East. 60 families last year could not get their children. There's a proposal for a free school, but they can't even find a site. So she wants to know what you've been doing.
There is a search for a site at the moment. I'm in regular contact with Lisa Mulherin, the councillor responsible for education in Leeds. They're trying to find the land. But it seems to me absolutely crazy that the council has got to search around trying to provide the land for a free school over which it will have no responsibility or control whatsoever. We pay the taxes, but we have no control over them.
But it does solve the problem. Class sizes are bulged
Well,
at the moment.
I have been working with the parents.
Families.
I've been working with the free school. I've been working with the parents very closely. They know that, and we want to get those places established by whatever means possible.
I will bring back in the Greens and Liberals in a minute. I just want to come to you on this one, Ryan. I mean, because your manifesto talks about grammar schools, it talks about more free schools. What we're hearing here is that actually we just need the money for more school places where the schools are.
Well, the Roundhay free school money is in place, as Fabian did say.
But
it's about finding the site.
They can't find a site.
There are pupils in the council ward that I currently represent that will access that school as well. And we said we'll work with anybody to get that site and get it built. But I'm astonished to hear Fabian say that he doesn't believe in free schools, because look at what's happening in this very constituency where we have free schools which are doing outstanding work.
What about the Liberal Democrats then? Where do you stand on free schools then, John?
By and large, we are happy with schools where they are doing a good job. Now, do we think that the direction that it's gone in recent years is good? Not so much, really. And we're certainly very much against the idea of grammar schools.
So what would you do then?
For me, and I think this goes back to some of the original question, is that moving forward with schools, yes, it needs money, but absolutely this is about helping teachers to take control of what's going on in the classroom. They're the experts, and in this party we believe in experts.
OK. Believe in experts. What about yourself, Anne?
There shouldn't even be a position where parents are thinking that they need to open a free school, because there should be proper funding for schools. we know how many pupils are going to come through, what the places are that we need. Therefore, it needs to be under local authority control and properly financed.
Okay, I'm going to come to another message that we've had on Twitter, and I'm going to come to yourself, John, first, I think, for this. This is a message from Ian East Leeds on Twitter. It's quite an interesting take on school. It says, without a Yorkshire Assembly, how will kids and schools here ever get the resources that London's do? And I think what he's talking to, they have a specific programme, don't they, in London? I can't remember what it's called, but that's been named Educational Achievement. He's saying they get more money than we do here.
I mean, I think in a certain way you can find that happens pretty much everywhere. In terms of devolving power to local areas, it is essential. You know, London doesn't...
Do you support the Northern Powerhouse?
Do I support the... In some ways of it, I don't particularly like the phrase, but actually I do believe that devolving to regions is the right way to go, because people who live in the area where the schools are know better about it than the people in London.
Okay, so you want to see it devolved. Anne, don't think the Green Party manifesto mentions anything about Northern Powerhouse, does it?
No, not specifically, but basically, generally, we are for devolution, for decisions to be being made at the lowest possible level, the lowest level regionally, locally.
Mm-hmm. And Fabian, what about yourself? Because again, I don't think there's no mention about Northern Powerhouse in the
No, but there's mention of a constitutional convention based on the 2015 report of a committee I sat on in the 2010 Parliament, which looked at the constitution of this country. Now, we have no written constitution, but we are the only country in Europe, and we're still in Europe and the EU, which does not have a constitutionally set framework for local government. And this is the problem, that our local government can be re-centralised, renationalised at any time. And we need to devolve back to people who are locally elected, because without accountability, there is no democracy.
Mm-hmm. And Ryan, it does seem like reading your manifesto, where I know there's a statement about making sure that there's a kind of a common framework between local authorities and devolved power. It sounds like Theresa May's dropped Northern Powerhouse.
Not at all. We continue to invest in the north at record levels, but it's about getting a balanced economy across the UK. And on local government, I would add, I worked on a research paper about reforming local government, and what we actually need to do is get the powers to the regions, and the parties need to agree a format for that to work. We need fewer elected representatives.
Deal, then? Come on, Ryan,
because the parties today, they haven't band their heads together and got on with it. We need to have a sensible conversation, all of us, in local government.
I think they'd say they've been trying to have one for ages, the central government.
Yes. In the new Magna Carta report that was published in 2015 by the Constitutional Reform Select Committee, and it was agreed by all parties on that committee. It's a select committee, and it lays out a clear framework, and it was very much written by academics who are expert in the field and approved by politicians of all parties.
The problem you've got locally is that Labour want one boundary because they would win the mayoralty, and the Conservatives want another. We have to sit down and have a cross-party conversation about the best deal for Yorkshire, Fabian.
But then we're suddenly imposing an elected executive representative, as your government, your party's done in the past with police and crime commissioners and with these elected mayors. It's kind of a hodgepodge. It's a mishmash. What we need is a proper framework.
It's okay for Sheffield, it's okay for Manchester, it's okay for Birmingham. Why isn't it okay
for West
Yorkshire?
The people of Leeds rejected elected mayors. Sorry,
it's not okay for Sheffield, or rather South Yorkshire, because they've had problems there because of defining where it is, and it's...
Well, that's all Derbyshire, isn't it? Where the Derbyshire's
exactly. So it's not worked for down there either. So it is a mishmash, as you say, and it's there's no clarity.
Do you want to add anything, John?
Yes, we need clarity.
I think, in a lot of ways, you know, we're arguing about what has been, and we have to think about what we want in the future. Now, we've had an election about having an elected mayor, but actually, I felt that wasn't fully covered, and we didn't have the discussion in advance that allowed people to really think through what it meant. Now, does that mean we should look at it again? I think there will be a time when we have to, because I do believe in the devolution for the area.
Okay, I think we're going to move on there. There's one more question that's coming. I think we probably haven't got time to answer it, but just say thank you, David. 1996, he tweeted in saying that as an ex-teacher, saw kids coming through with very poor English. So there's a lot of concerns out there. I am going to move us very quickly to another question now. This one came from Daniel from Meanwood, and this is a question that Daniel has about the minimum wage.
My name's Daniel, I'm from Meanwood, and my question is, do we really think that £10 an hour is a good idea?
OK, Daniel, there is £10 an hour a good idea? Now, I know Daniel told me that he works for a small business and he's got a lot of worries about the cost of minimum wage. So, Anne, let's go to you. £10 an hour, good idea or not?
As a minimum wage, £10 an hour, even £10 an hour is still not enough to live on. And the age-related wage as well is very unfair, coming back to what we were hearing about young people and their problems as well. So actually this is a good opportunity for me to introduce, if you like, the idea that we have of a citizen's income, which would give everybody a basic income, and then discussions then about the wage on top of that would, if everybody has a basic income that they can live on, then the minimum wage would become part of that in the discussion.
OK, Ryan, £10 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, as we said there, of course, we all want as much money as possible for people in work. But as Daniel hinted in his response to you, he works for a small business, and we have to make sure that the levels of the minimum national living wage it is now are sustainable for the long term. You cannot just keep uplifting the wage if businesses can't afford it. The way to do so is to reduce taxes on individuals and businesses to make sure that we are taxing people less, they can keep more of their money, and at the same time support businesses to increase their wages in the long run.
OK, Fabian, you were shaking your head there.
No, I mean, I think it's, you know, we need a living wage, and there's no doubt about that.
Where does your, because we've got two living wages,
we've said £10 an hour, and that's where we placed it. But it's also about taxation, and it is appalling and shocking in this day and age that people in work still require benefits in order to make ends meet, that people in work have to visit food banks, and these zero-hour contracts, it's all very well being paid £10 an hour, but if you don't know when you're working...
What you can do about zero-hour contracts?
Well, we're going to abolish the zero-hour contracts. We've made that very clear in our manifesto. In-work poverty is something we should all be ashamed of, and it seems to me if you pay people a decent wage, they can put that money into the economy by spending through consumer spending.
I mean, John, you know, in 2014, 20% of people in Leeds were paid below the national minimum living wage, national minimum wage. That's quite high.
Yeah, it's disgraceful.
Would you go for £10 an hour?
I wouldn't put a specific money on it. I believe in the fact that, you know, it's for a independent body to be looking at, to be able to understand what it is that is the proper living wage to be used. And I think that's the role of an independent body, to be able to do that. I don't think it should be politicians who make the decision as to how much people can live on, particularly when £10 an hour in one part of the country means very different to £10 an hour in another. So what would
you do? Because we've got to, you know, do you believe in a minimum wage then? Are you just saying leave it open? So
I do, but I do believe that we do have to keep looking at it to make sure that it's actually a real one that is in line with what people need to live. How much
do you reckon then, John?
I don't honestly know. I mean, to be honest, I would say that there are people who are paid to come up with this amount. Now, whether that's £10 an hour, whether that's £12 an hour, I would ask the experts to come up with that.
I mean, Ryan, you were saying, you know, that you're worried about the impact on business there, but is it not the case that rather than spending so much money on in-work benefits, which is what the government currently does, a huge amount, in fact, the biggest amount of benefits actually goes on in-work benefits, doesn't it? If you pay people more money, then you don't need to pay them so much benefits.
That's entirely right. And, you know, we all know that the best way out of poverty is work, and so we need to create more jobs, as we have record high employment.
But you haven't even supported the Living Wage Foundation's
and as I say, we've got a
figure.
commitment in our manifesto to set the living wage at £9 an hour by 2020, because that's sustainable. And I'd say to people like Fabian who are calling for it to be much higher, you know, how's the ice cream factory on Hare Hills Corner, Fabian, going to pay that wage? How are they going to increase if they're not getting... It is to the business. Are you saying that's not a difference to the businesses who have to pay the wages?
I know, because I ran a business for 20 years.
Well, you should know better then.
Like.
You've got to have the money.
No, what I know is if you pay your employees a decent wage, you actually get more productivity from those employees as well.
And if you tax them less as well, they have more money in their
absolutely.
pocket. You want to raise taxes, Fabian?
No, I would set the tax threshold at a minimum of 10,000.
Jeremy Corbyn wants income tax at 25%, so that's not going to help people on low pay, is it?
But it's not one or the other.
But it's true, you haven't ruled out any tax. You haven't ruled out any tax results, tax rises in your manifesto.
The Conservative Party is and remains a party that believes in lower taxation.
Yeah, but you haven't absolutely ruled them out.
What we've done in the past, we've increased the personal allowance over the past 7 years, and it's worth £1,000.
What are you going to do? Are you going to raise the tax level?
Yes. the public services need to be properly funded, and there's got to be raises in tax. Yes, we would also introduce
So
a Robin Hood tax.
Who's going to pay more?
Well, a Robin Hood tax on the financial services. We would also make sure that the rich are paying their fair share.
So what does that mean then?
So raising the tax for the top 1%, and that so that would then go some way towards being able to raise the minimum wage. Can I just say that I also think, and having worked for some time in this, I think that some of the most valued members of our society, the people who are caring for other people, some of them are on the minimum wage. I think that is what's it saying to the people, in a sense, who are doing so many caring jobs throughout the country. It's what we're saying, we're valuing them. And 0 hours contracts as well, yes.
I have to completely agree. I mean, having worked in social care, it's a travesty that people with jobs like that are being paid right at the bottom of the scale. They're caring for our most vulnerable people. We have to make sure that they're able to get a decent wage.
Of course, a lot of people in social care are on informal contracts. We talked about zero-hour economy there. I know the Conservative manifesto talks about protecting the gig economy, but it doesn't say how it's going to do it, though, Ryan.
Well, I think we set out a broad strategy for the economy overall and for anyone who's employed. And I think what you've got...
There's nothing specific there like get rid of zero-hour contracts, introduce workers' rights from day one.
What you have got in this manifesto is a commitment more than ever before in terms of strengthening workers' rights for people in work. That's paternity and maternity leave and all those great things that are there for workers' rights. But we do need to have a sensible conversation about these things like social care to get the right balance that's sustainable for the future.
OK, I'm going to move us on, actually, because we've got another question on Facebook, which I think is going to bring us back to housing and homelessness, which is something that you mentioned at the start, so I will move us on. This is from Melissa on Facebook, and Melissa asks, the record for homelessness has increased massively. Why do you think this is? And Fabian, you mentioned housing right at the start, so I'll come to you first.
Well, my 3 children, who all brought up in Leeds and went to school in Leeds, are all in London now. They're all grown up. And 2 of them just cannot afford to buy their own property. They can barely afford to rent it. My elder daughter, who's married and has a 1-year-old child, they can barely afford the mortgage, and they're earning more than I am, quite a lot more. So it's affordability. Now, I produced a report on how we can build 250,000 homes a year, mainly in social housing, as we call it, social housing, but build them to a very high environmental standard for rent through local government. I don't mean the council estates of old from the 50s and 60s. I mean the modern, latest materials that would make those houses affordable. And we've even spoken to some of the big names in pension funds who've said that they are willing to invest in that with the public sector. So we get private-public partnerships investing through a national housing investment bank with local government, pooling their resources in regions to build those new properties.
Okay, I mean, it's fair to say all 4 manifestos have commitments about house building in there. You may disagree about how many and in what time. Let me come to you, John, now. I mean, Leeds North East is the most expensive for housing in the whole of the city. £220,000 for the average. I mean, that is just so way beyond my comprehension. What are you going to do? You think that's good? What are you going to do about it?
I think that there is something in there in terms of the amount that they cost in this area. I kind of want to come back to the original question, though, because I used to work on homelessness issues, and whilst there is something about house prices being a part of that, actually we need to get under the skin of why people become homeless, and that has to do with a myriad different amounts of reasons, whether that be mental health, whether it be addiction, whether it be other such things. Those are things we really need to get to grips with, and jumping into policy about how many homes we have and how much they cost, important as it is, doesn't really address the homelessness
issue. Okay, what do you reckon
issue.
on that? So it says that's not addressing homelessness.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about the house prices, but of course we're talking about rental. The rented sector is a lot to do with the homelessness. So we, as a Green Party, we would introduce rent controls. We would want to see a landlord licensing
What are you actually going to say?
So there would be some sort of control over that, some sort of licensing scheme for landlords, and making sure that there's some minimum standards in the homes as well. It's a scandal that there are children going to school who have been in bed and breakfasts. We need more homes, and I agree, obviously, we need to build many more homes, and I'm glad to hear Fabian say that their pledge is for them to be very much environmentally friendly as well.
Ryan, Anne's just called it a scandal. I've got some other figures. Apparently, following on from what Fabian was saying, is in Leeds last year, there's only 2 social housing projects that were started and 148 affordable homes. That's just not enough, is it?
I think if you look at the policies that are coming forward from the central government, we're building on the fact that we inherited a situation where Labour weren't building houses, and so we've now got a record number of houses being built.
But
and we
who
have
are they for? Who are they for? Are they just not 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom ones out in Greenbelt?
This is why councils now are going through a process of site allocation to determine what kind of houses they want in an area, neighbourhood plans for local communities. But each of those developments has to have a certain proportion of affordable housing, i.e. social housing.
But you know, your national manifesto talks a lot about high density, high quality housing. It doesn't talk about affordable or social housing.
Well, that's why we introduced the Help to Buy mortgages and Help to Buy ISAs, so we can support young people onto the property ladder. And I believe in a home-owning democracy. I want young people to leave the great schools here in Leeds North East, go on to university, and not ship down to London like Fabian's kids did, but stay here in Leeds where there are good jobs and good housing.
Give you the last word on this.
That's a bit below the belt, actually. You can't criticise adult children for going to where the work is and where they can get employment.
The point is the jobs have got to be here. That's what
yes, I want to see the jobs come out of London too, to be honest, but that also depends on being able to live here. But look, let's go back to the original question. It was about homelessness. And John touched on something very important about mental health and addiction. And Leeds City Council's homelessness unit has been, up till now, remarkably effective. And I pay tribute to them. We need a lot more of it.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Melissa for that question. Thank you for all your questions there. We've got the debate certainly hotting up. Of course, what do you think about what the candidates have had to say so far? There is so many ways you can get in touch. Please put your questions and your comments to us. We'll certainly put as many of them out on the show as we can. Now, just to remind you, on Twitter, we're at Made in Leeds. You can also find us on Facebook as well. You can even email the team. Blimey, we're modern, aren't we? You can go to decisionmade@madeinleeds.tv, or you can WhatsApp us on 07771 774 018. We'll come back after this short break. Welcome back to the final part of Decision Made for Leeds North East. We're here with the key candidates who are asking for your votes in this constituency. You've been tweeting us with the hashtag DecisionLeeds on Twitter. Right, before we go to a question that we got from someone in Chapeltown, we're going to go back to social media. This is a question, it's specifically for you, Fabian, but I think the others will want to come in afterwards and have their say. It's from David 1966 Smith. He's been on Twitter. He has a question. He says, as a lifelong Labour supporter, it seems like Leeds City Council, the Labour Party and Fabian have lost their way. Time for a change. So obviously I'll put that to you first, Fabian.
Well, he's entitled to his view. I don't know if he's been a lifelong Labour voter or not, and I'm sorry he's so disappointed. But as far as Leeds City Council's concerned, as I was saying earlier, a lot of the powers of Leeds City Council and your locally elected representatives are trumped by central government, which holds all the strings, especially the purse strings.
And is some of this about Jeremy Corbyn as well?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. Without knowing more about why he's disappointed in my 20-year record, it's hard to respond, isn't it? And that's one of the reasons I'm afraid I'm no longer on Twitter, is because you often get these 120-character statements, and they're never followed up. You don't know if the person's your constituent. You don't know what the gripe is. I'd much prefer to have a conversation with somebody, as I've been doing on the doorstep this evening.
OK, and I mean, he says there as well, though, he feels that the Labour Party's lost their way. That might be about Jeremy Corbyn, because obviously lots of people do have concerns. Because you resigned yourself from the Shadow Cabinet, didn't you?
I resigned from the Shadow Foreign Affairs team as Shadow Europe Minister because of splits within my own constituency. And yes, all parties have divisions within them. They all look at the different ways they can go. All parties are an amalgam of different views, and they take, one end to the other. I mean, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens. Are they still a problem
for you then, those?
Well, no. I mean, I was appointed to the front bench again in October with this peace and disarmament brief covering defence and foreign affairs, and I've been doing my very best with that brief in terms of the United Nations, in terms of nuclear and non-nuclear disarmament. You know, these are idealistic positions.
Okay.
I'm a realist. They're not going to be achieved overnight.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, Ryan, you're on the council yourself. You said you put that in your introduction for us. The council's lost its way.
I think the crux of it is the Labour Party has lost its way. I grew up in a mining community, and many of the people I went to school with and their parents say exactly the same, that the Labour Party is no longer what it used to be. And
But to be
Jeremy Corbyn is
to fair to the Labour Council, I mean, local authorities are left with less and less powers, aren't they, because central government has pulled those back?
Well, no, the local Leeds City Council has more powers now to raise its own money, as well as they are doing. We've had the new homes bonus alone is giving Leeds City Council a huge amount of money. But the reason of David's question was the Labour Party lost its way. And yes, that is true under Jeremy Corbyn, and that's the real risk for people at this election. They can have one of two people as Prime Minister. They can have Theresa May and me as a local MP, or Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister and Corbyn's candidate in favour.
That's the choice. What about you, Anne? Anne, do you feel the council have lost its way?
That at some stage.
Council lost its way?
I'm afraid I've got an admission to make. I've only actually been living back in Leeds here for a year, and one of the things I'm enjoying finding out is how the council is working. But I do know from living elsewhere about the great problems that local councils have because of central government funding, which has been reduced over time.
And John, how do you feel?
I mean, so let's cut to the chase on this one. The problem with the Labour Party at the moment is that they spend their whole time bickering and arguing with themselves. They just about managed to pick it out of the thing to have a half-decent kind of few weeks in the last one where they're not arguing, but they'll be back to it soon. I mean, only in the last, I don't know, couple of months we've seen 3 Labour councillors resign because of falling out with their own party. And around the country, you have a parliamentary Labour Party who doesn't support their own leader.
Having said that, not far from here, though, of course, Liberal Democrats did suspend one of your own candidates as well. So there are divisions within all the parties. We're going to move on now to hear from Raoul in Chapeltown. Raoul has a question about policing in the area.
My name is Raoul, and I live in Chapeltown. And I would like to know what are the proposals based on police enforcement to this area. And my request is the police to be more visible to the area.
There we go, that's Raoul in Chapeltown. He wants the police to be more visible in Chapeltown. John, I'll come to you first. What are you going to do for Raoul? Are you going to put more police?
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, one of the things within our manifesto is very much to put more money into policing to get more local policing. I live just up the road. And spend time talking with our local PC Rotherham about what's going on and things like that. It's great to see your local police around. It's great to have the feedback from them. Now, that is the same within Chapeltown. That's the same within Chapel Allerton. We want to see more, and we want to see better community policing. Now, where that's not happening yet, we want to see it happen well.
Ryan, at the heart of this is not about numbers and about funding, and we do know, I mean, West Yorkshire Police, they're going to have a cut in real terms of £117.5 million. Police numbers have gone right down. We've lost nearly 1,000. That's between up to 2010 to 2015. We've lost nearly 1,000 police officers in West Yorkshire.
Risk of getting caught up in my numbers like Diane Abbott did on policing. I think it's fair to say, in terms of all of us on the panel today, we will not be responsible for operational policing if we are elected. And it is right that those powers rest with the police command down at Ellen Road, that they can decide operationally what needs to happen.
They having to make, if Dee Collins has got to make cuts like that, and she's lost nearly 1,000 police officers.
So what we have to do is recognise that the nature and the type of crime is changing, and the police have to react to that, and government needs to react to that as well in the way it funds, and we've got a commitment.
So does that mean that we don't need more police officers?
Well, no, it doesn't, because we've got a commitment in our manifesto to input even more money in specific counter-terrorism policing, and also money into the police budgets moving forward. But we have to recognise that sometimes, again, it's not always about the amount of money, it's about how we are resourcing the police themselves, and we have to recognise that the nature of crime is changing, and police need to react to that as they are doing here, and that's why, like John says, he sees his local police officer on the street.
And Raoul, though, he wants to see police officers on the streets. He wants to see more.
Definitely, I would agree, and there needs to be a policy on policing that actually enhances community cohesion. I was quite shocked last year, if I can share with you. I was out leafleting prior to the referendum. Green were in leaflets I was given for the Green Party, and I came across a domestic violence incident that was happening upstairs. I called the police. I waited for 35 minutes. Luckily there was somebody else there as well. And at the time I thought, this is, I was very shocked.
Well, 35 minutes,
and
Fabian.
it was, yes.
When we were in government, we put a lot more police on the streets. That had the effect of allowing, for example, the neighbourhood policing teams, which were very, very effective in dealing with small, petty crime. I remember meeting the divisional commanders when we were in power and hearing their plans, because we can't, as Ryan says, we can't get involved with operational issues, but he was explaining to me how they were taking drug dealers off the streets of Chapeltown. I was in Chapeltown yesterday. I saw for myself some of the issues. But I'm sorry, it is about resources, actually. If you're reducing the number of West Yorkshire police by 1,204, which is what they've been reduced to date from 2010, that will have an effect. And of course we need more money for counter-terrorism, but we also need to ensure that our public feels safe, and they feel safe by having neighbourhood policing teams. That costs money. And also, let's not forget about intelligence either.
Let's talk about that too, because, I mean, obviously you have got 10,000 new police officers nationally in your manifesto.
Yes.
And Ryan did mention Diana, but there's been a bit of a question about the funding for that, how it's going to be paid for, isn't it?
Well, she did get her figures in a twist, to coin a phrase. And I'm not going to stand here and quote you figures, because they are actually written in the manifesto and in the costings we've done and how we're going to raise that money. So we've made it clear what we actually want to do and how that money is going to be raised.
I mean, some people say the costings are pretty near, but some of the estimates about how much tax you're going to raise are pretty over-ambitious for the Labour manifesto.
Well, I think that's for us to try
And
and
that's
see in
including the
practice
IFS,
whether it
the
actually
Institute for Studies.
works. But
The problem with
what our
practicing,
manifesto...
though, the problem with practicing,
what our-
Fabian, is
no.
the people, when we go back into
No, but
debt,
what-
like you left last time, the people you hurt the hardest are the
No,
poorest
Ryan,
in society.
sorry, you love saying that it was the Labour government that actually caused the financial crisis.
But your
It wasn't.
manifesto
It's
isn't
how
even
you handled it,
costed,
and you know how you handled
Ryan,
it.
your
You've doubled the
manifesto isn't
national
even
debt.
costed.
We've cut the deficit by two-thirds, Fabian.
Yeah, but you've increased national
To say
debt.
that to us. That is outrageous, frankly.
The Liberal Democrat manifesto is fully costed and is recognised by the IFS as the one that is actually sensible. The Labour manifesto, I'm sorry, if you added unicorns and stuck it on the side of a red bus, it'd be equally reliable. Conservatives is just a nasty and squalid
Okay.
one.
At least we're giving hope.
Well, there we go. It started to get a bit fractious there, didn't it? The question of money. But I'm afraid to say that is it, is the end of the decision made for debate for Leeds North East. Now, here is the full list of candidates standing in this constituency on June the 8th. There are also three other parties. They are the Alliance of Green Socialism, Christian People's Alliance and the Yorkshire Party. So my many thanks to the candidates here tonight and for you at home for watching and your comments on social media. Now, as I mentioned at the start, due to the tragic events in Manchester last week, our debates were cancelled, but we do still hope we'll have a debate on a second debate next Tuesday for Morley and Outwood. I hope you can join me then. But a personal plea. In recent times, people have died for the right to vote. Just make sure you use yours.